Welcome back to Adventures of a Black Belt Sommelier, sponsored by Four Paws Restaurant, the iconic fine dining restaurant in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's located in a beautifully restored mansion that was built in 1870 and where I am the sommelier. It's an excellent restaurant with wonderful food, attentive professional service, and hopefully excellent wine service. I've posted this story before. Um, so if you've heard this story before, I don't, it won't hurt my feelings if you don't watch this or listen to this again. But these podcasts, these episodes, they disappear after a while, and I don't want this one to disappear because it's so much fun. So I'm sharing it again, and maybe some of the people around the world who listen to my podcast will be hearing it for the first time. In the early 70s, I was a waiter at a restaurant in New York City called Adam's Apple. It wasn't a very fancy restaurant. There was a kind of fern bar on the first floor, a disco on the second floor, but the third floor was a private dining room. And if there was a dinner party in the private dining room, it was really a good idea to be one of the waiters because generally it was guys lighting their cigars with $100 bills and throwing money around. Um, so anyway, one night, late, I think it was a Saturday, the manager came in the kitchen and said that there was a very, very prestigious party of 11 arriving at 1 for dinner in the private dining room. And since it was such a prestigious party, he needed a waiter for every guest. So everybody volunteered. I think there were about 20 waiters working. Everybody volunteered. He picked 11. I was fortunate enough to be one of the 11 that he picked. Um, One funny side note, the head waiter was Jeff Daniels, and the bouncer was Arnold Schwarzenegger at this restaurant. But anyway, at 1 o'clock, we had the table set for 11, and there was one of us standing behind each chair. And the door opened. The first person through the door was Frank Sinatra, and following him was Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, Dean Martin, Angie Dickinson, Merv Griffin, the Rat Pack. Um, there were 10 of them. There were only 10 of them. So the seat to my right, to the right of the guest I was standing behind, was actually empty most of the night. And so this waiter to my right had nothing to do but stand there. But he couldn't leave because that person might arrive, and then the manager wanted there to be one waiter for every guest. Um, if you're not my age, you will be surprised to know that at that point in time, people smoked and ate at the same time. They would alternate puffs on their cigarette with forkfuls of food or sips of their drink. So the main thing we did was keep their ashtray clean because heaven forbid there was a cigarette ash in Frank Sinatra's ashtray. And then we went downstairs to the second floor to the bar to get them a drink every few minutes. Mostly they were drinking, I think, scotch and water or bourbon and water. It's a long time ago, but they weren't drinking wine. Nobody really drank wine back then, much in the United States. So about 2, probably something like that. It was time to serve the first course, so we all went down to the kitchen, which was in the basement, got the oysters on the half shell, brought them up, served them, changed the ashtrays, got everybody another drink. When they'd finished the oysters, we removed them, went down in the kitchen in the basement, um, 3 stories down, 3 floors down, and got the Dover sole with lemon caper butter, and green beans that we served as the main course. And then when they'd finished that, we removed that, went downstairs, got the cheesecake with some kind of fruit sauce. I don't remember, maybe strawberry sauce or something. Um, and continued to change their ashtrays and get them another drink as they needed them. They were let me say they weren't teetotalers. So anyway, I think it was about 4. The manager came in the dining room and said, there's really nothing left to do. I just need one person to stay with them, and I volunteered, so it was me. And he went home. All the chefs had gone. Everybody's gone home. It was just these 10 famous people and me in the restaurant. Um, I don't exactly remember how, but somehow at about 4:30, Don Rickles arrived and came up to the dining room. Maybe they had maybe they had somebody on the front door to let him in. I don't remember. But anyway, he arrived about 4:30. Don Rickles. If you don't, if you're not old enough to know who Don Rickles was, he was a comedian who made his living making fun of people. Kind of all his routines were pretty much ad-libbed, and he insulted everybody he came into contact with. So when he arrived, he called me a hockey puck or something like that. I got him a drink, etc. Um, Unfortunately, he wanted dinner. I was the only employee of the restaurant still there, and I was not a cook. I was very young. I was probably 20. Well, yeah, I think I was 20 years old. And but even at 20, I knew that telling Frank Sinatra that he couldn't get dinner from Don Rickles was not a very smart idea. So I said, okay. And I went down to the kitchen. At this point in my life, I had never actually seen anyone open an oyster, much less opened one myself. I did not know that there was such a thing as an oyster knife. I did not know there was such a thing as an oyster glove. Not sure there was back then, but certainly I didn't know about them if there were. I did manage to find the oysters. I managed to find the plate the oysters are served on. Managed to find the ice to put them on, and the lemon to cut a wedge of, and the little souffle dish that the cocktail sauce went in. And then and then I got the oysters with no earthly idea how to open the oyster. But my logic was the bigger the knife, the better the leverage would be. I had some kind of rudimentary understanding of how oysters were constructed and how I might go about opening them. It took me probably 3 dozen oysters to get 6 that were servable. But in the process of opening those 6 oysters, I lacerated my left hand, just to a bloody pulp, and bled all over the oysters. And anyway, again, it was not an option to go back up and say, I can't serve Don Rickles oysters. So I washed my blood. First I bandaged up my hand, and then I washed my blood off the oysters and put them, 6 of them, the 6 that were actually not completely mangled by my attempt to open them, on the bed of ice with the cocktail sauce and the lemon wedge, and went up, served them to Don Rickles. I'm sure he said something. I don't exactly remember. I'm sure he said something insulting, um, or sarcastic, and changed the ashtrays, got everybody another drink if they needed one. Went back downstairs with the task of preparing the Dover sole with lemon caper butter and green beans for Don Rickles, with no earthly idea how to do so. Um, I don't know that I'd ever cooked a meal for anyone at that point in my life, not even myself. Um, but I'd seen my mother cook catfish growing up. Unfortunately, there was no catfish and no cornmeal. But I found the Dover sole and I found some flour. I dredged the Dover sole in the flour, got a pan hot, put some butter in it, cooked the Dover sole. I'm sure I cooked it 10 times longer than it needed to be cooked. I boiled the green beans and put them on the plate with no seasoning of any kind, nothing, just boiled green beans on the plate. Put the sole on the plate, squeezed a lemon on it, put some capers on it, and called that caper Dover sole with lemon caper butter. Took it up, served it to Don Rickles. Of course, Don Rickles at this point was so drunk, I could have served him my shoe and he would have been happy with it. Um, Changed the ashtrays, got everybody another drink. Went downstairs. The cheesecake with fruit sauce, I think I pulled off pretty capably. Served that to him. Got everybody another drink. Changed everybody's ashtrays, etc. Um, the incredible, actually, the most astonishing thing about this story is the fact that at that age, in that situation, I actually thought I could pull it off, and I did. Not only did I think I could pull it off, but I actually did, which has given rise to my kind of belief in my life that I always kind of believe I can do anything. If you give me the chance, I'll pull it off. Anyway, about 4:30 or 5 o'clock, no, more like 7 o'clock, they they'd had enough. They'd had enough cigarettes and enough drinks and enough stories and everything else they were doing to leave. And they all had rides. Fortunately, they all had cars there to pick them up with drivers, because every one of them had way had way too much to drink to be driving. And they staggered off into the morning sun and got in their cars and drove off. And uh, I don't remember exactly how much the tip was for the 11 waiters that were involved that night, but I do remember it was a lot of money. This was always the case at a party in the private dining room at that restaurant. It was called Adam's Apple. I don't really remember much more about it than that. I'd have no idea what we served or anything. But anyway, that's my story of serving dinner to Don Rickles for Frank Sinatra in 1972 at Adam's Apple Restaurant in New York City. Thanks for tuning in to Adventures of Black Belt Sommelier. And if you're in the Twin Cities, come see me at Four Paws. It is a really, really excellent restaurant.